Okay, the first thing that we're going to do is fold our fabric in half, matching the selvage edges. That's what it says to do in step 2 on our guide sheet. We've already trimmed our pattern, leaving a 1/4 of an inch margin, and we're going to use this layout for our fabric. So I'm going to fold my fabric in half. Now, we need to fold it with the wrong sides together, and I'm using these little raised bumps on here to determine that this is the side that's going to be the wrong side. And I'm going to fold those two edges together. The bumpy side should be towards the middle. And I want to make sure that my edges are right on top of each other. And you might have to do a little smoothing to do that. The next thing that we're going to do is put some pins on this edge to hold it together while we are putting our pattern on. And these are just temporary. So I'm going to start in the middle and work out each direction. And to put a pin in, this is my technique. I push down against the table. This is an old table, so it won't hurt anything. Don't do this on Mom's good dining room table. And you want to make sure that both the head and the point are sticking out. So there's my first one. I'm going to put 5 on here. And my non-dominant hand is kind of pushing against the fabric so that I get this little bump. Keep your finger out of the way so you don't accidentally pin through your finger. And then I'm going to put one right about here. And then one more. Once you have the two edges pinned together, then you're ready to start putting on the pattern. Our next step is to put the pattern on, and the first thing that we're going to do is look at our diagram. We're doing the one that has the 45 inch width fabric. And what I want to do is lay my pattern, or lay my fabric, so that it looks exactly like the diagram. So I'm going to move this off to the side, and in the diagram the selvages are away from me, so I'm moving them that way. And it says that I need to put the pocket pattern on the fold right here. So I'm going to make sure that this edge right here is right next to the edge of the fabric. And I'm only going to put a few pins in just to get us started. You always want to pin the arrow first. So I'm pinning right by where the fold arrow is. And if you notice on our patterns, we have written the words, "Do not cut here." This is going to be one big piece, so we don't cut along this line at all. So I have the two ends of my arrow done, and then I'm just going to put one pin right here to hold this while we put the other ones on. The next piece that I'm going to do is the large piece, and I'm going to flip my fabric around to do that just so it's a little bit closer to me. And if I look at my diagram, I notice that I'm going to flip my diagram around now. It should be so that the top is facing to my left at this point. Open up my pattern. And I'm going to lay it out flat. And it's okay if it's over here where the pins are. We're going to take those out before we start cutting. But I want to make sure that I have it all on here. Now, the way that we pin pieces are to start with our arrows, then we do the compass points, then we do the corners, and then we do in between. I'm not going to put all of the pins in. I'm just going to get us started simply because it's going to take too much time if I show you all the pinning. But you should have put marks on your pattern all the way around where the pins are supposed to go. So I'm going to start by pinning one end of the arrow. Okay, and I just want to make sure my whole pattern is on. I can either use a seam gauge to do this, or sometimes when you are working with a bigger piece of fabric, you might need to use a tape measure to measure, because we want the 2 points of this arrow to be parallel to the selvage. But since this is kind of a short amount, I'm going to go ahead and use a seam gauge. I'm going to lay the point, or the end of my ruler, right where the point of the arrow is, and I'm going to move my slider so it's right there. And because I have one in here, it's going to kind of stay in place, but I can move it a little bit one way or the other to make sure that these are exactly the same. And so smooth your pattern down and put a pin in this end. Now, the next step is your compass points. So I'm going to put one at north, one at south, and actually I'm going to take this one out because I don't need it anymore. And I'm going to take one for east, and then one for west. And then I'll finish pinning this in a few minutes, but right now what I want to do is get that last little piece on. So again, I'm going to flip my material around, my fabric around, and I have my last little one, which is my, my pattern for my loops. And we're going to use this piece of fabric right here to do a sample seam. So don't put the smack dab in the middle here. Put it down close to where your pocket is. And we've got an arrow. So that means that we have to put that in so that it's parallel to the edge. So I put my pin in, making sure that the point of my pin does not go past my cutting edge. None of your pins should be sticking past the cutting edge. And it's okay that these little bumps are sticking out there because we're not cutting along here, remember? And I'm going to use my seam gauge again and measure. And I'm really not even looking at the measurement. It doesn't matter what the amount is. It could be 2 inches, it could be 6 inches. It just has to be the same on both ends. So I'm measuring that up. I'm going to put another pin here to hold this in place. And I think I'll go this way. And then because this one is really small, we probably only need about 4 or 5 pins to hold it in place. So I'm going to go ahead and finish pinning it, making sure that the whole pin is inside the cutting line. And my pins are bigger, so I might not need as many as you're going to need, but make sure that it's not going to wiggle around. The pattern pieces are all in place. What you need to do now is go back and finish pinning. Remember, we do arrows first, then the compass points, north, south, east, and west, then the corners, then in between. That's the order we pin. Finish that up for now.